Okay, I'm going to start over again. This Parsha is Parshas Korach, and Parshas Korach has a tremendous amount of lessons to teach us. We know that David HaMelech was the editor of Sefer Tehillim. That when everybody asks who wrote Sefer Tehillim, so we say David HaMelech wrote it, but the truth is David didn't write all the Tehillim, he didn't write all the Psalms. The Psalms were written but many people contributed to the Psalms. We know that Moshe Rabbeinu contributed a certain amount of Psalms. We know that that Adam HaRishon contributed a certain amount of Psalms. We know that the Bnei Korach also contributed a certain amount of Psalms, including the Lamnatseach Livnei Korach. Lamnatseach to the Bnei Korach, to the children of Korach. If you look at those Mizmorim that are attached to the Bnei Korach, those Mizmorim have a theme of Yerushalayim and a focus on Yerushalayim and a focus on Eretz Yisrael. And you have to wonder, why did the Bnei Korach Davka sing about Jerusalem? That David HaMelech would sing about Jerusalem is understood. That others would sing about Jerusalem is understood. But why Davka the Bnei Korach was their theme in their Tehillim, in their Psalms, that was edited into Psalms by David HaMelech? Why would they have focused on Yerushalayim? What's the connection between them and Yerushalayim? So to understand this, let's look at Korach and who Korach was and what was bothering Korach. You know, as we mentioned a moment ago, Korach didn't necessarily have a personal vendetta against Moshe. Korach had a certain outlook that was a very difficult outlook. As far as Korach was concerned, Korach turns to Moshe in the middle of the rebellion. He says, Ki kol ha'eda kulam kedoshim. The entire congregation is holy. Why do we need a leader, Moshe? Why are you leading us? Why are you standing up on top of us? Why are you the authority when at the end of the day, every single Jew is kedoshim, every single Jew is holy, every single Jew is a potential leader? So why are you putting yourself in that position? Because what Korach was rebelling against, he was rebelling against the leadership of the Torah. Not necessarily the Torah itself, but why was there a necessity to have a leader? And this was an ideology that touched so many parts of his life. There was no reason in Korach's estimation why one person had to stick out beyond the others, why everything had to be equal, everything had to be even. Korach was rebelling against the concept of what's called hachna, the concept of being subservient to a leader. He was rebelling against the concept that is taught in the Torah of lo saser yamin usmol, that you're not allowed to deviate from the right or the left, from the words that the rabbis tell you. And that means that even if the rabbis tell you the right is left and the left is right, we're obligated to follow them. These are our leaders, and we have a structure of Mesorah, we have a structure of leadership, and we can't walk away from that. We have a pasuk in the Torah that says, Vasisa kol asher yerucha, that we have to do everything that they show us, everything they tell us. This is a basic part of the foundation of the Jewish people. Moshe kibel Torah misinai Mesorah l'Yeshua l'Zkenim. Moshe got the Torah from Sinai. He gave it to Joshua to the Zkenim, to the elders, then to the prophets, then to the men of great assembly. There is a concept of the passage of Torah and of the leadership of those that are in charge, those that are responsible for the passage of Torah. But Korach looked at it and said that since every person can connect directly from God and get what he needs straightly from the Torah, so therefore every single one of us is equal. And if every single one of us is equal, if the whole nation, ki kol ha'eda kulam kedoshim, we're all holy and equal, there is no reason to have leadership. There is no reason to take one person out from the group and to make him stand above the rest. And with that, Korach misunderstood the very structure of leadership, the very structure of learning, the very structure of hashpah, of influencing other people. Now, why do I say this? Because take a look at Korach's questions. Korach questions and challenges Moshe. It says that Korach took words, and he used his words to challenge Moshe. He stood in front of Moshe, in front of the entire nation, and he said to Moshe, Talis shakula tchelis, if you have a talis that's made completely of tchelis, chayeves betzitzis olo, is it obligated to put tzitzis on it? Because we know that the tzitzis that we wear are made of tchelis. We know that we have one strand of tchelis. We're meant to have, biblically, one strand of tchelis mixed into the tzitzis. Now, that certainly is at a time when we know what the tchelis is, when we can find the tchelis. Nowadays that we don't have a Masorah for tchelis, most of the rabbis feel that we can't break the Masorah, which is that we don't know exactly which of the fish or which of the mollusks is the one where we derive the tchelis from, and therefore there is now a movement to wear tchelis, but our gedolim, almost all of our gedolim, are not do not wear tchelis, because again we've lost the Masorah. But in the time when we had tchelis, so we'd have that one blue thread. So Korach asks the question, he says, well, what happens if you have an entire garment that's made of tchelis? And if the entire garment is made of tchelis, then why do you need to put one strand of tchelis on? What kind of crazy question is that? If the mitzvah is to put one strand on, it doesn't matter what color the talis is, the mitzvah is to put tchelis on a talis. You have to put tchelis on a talis. So the fact that the whole talis is made of blue, that's going to take you away from the obligation of putting tchelis on? What was in Korach's mind? Korach was a Talmid Chacham. He was a Torah scholar. He wasn't some idiot off the street. Because fundamentally, Korach looked at this and said, every mitzvah in the Torah is meant to teach us a certain midah, a certain characteristic. We have pounded this in through our study of Pirkei Avos, that every mitzvah in the Torah is as much a mitzvah, an obligation, a commandment, an action, as it is a midah, as it is a characteristic, as it is something that affects the way we behave. So he looks at this and he says that what Tcheles says to us is that there is a leader. There is one strand that shows the way. There's one strand that teaches the lesson, and everything else comes along with it. And that strand of blue, what is the lesson that the strand of blue teaches? It teaches us to remember the sea. The sea teaches us to remember the blue of the sky. The blue of the sky reminds us to remember the Kisei HaKavod, the throne of God. I always ask the question on Tcheles, if that's what Tcheles is supposed to do, so then why don't you just tie a little charm on the end of your tzitzis, a little throne, like a charm bracelet, right? Just tie a little throne on the end of your tzitzis, and it'll remind you of the Kisei HaKavod, of the throne of Hashem. What do you have to go like? This reminds me of this, like Chad Gadya, yeah? This, did this, who touched me this, who did this. Like, why do you need that whole business? Just remember that the tzitzis remind us, look at the sky and remember the Kisei HaKavod. Remember the sea, and the sea reminds me of the sky, and the sky reminds me of the throne reminds me of God. So there's a few beautiful answers, but I'll give you one. Because to remember Hashem is not always so simple. And sometimes you have to start small. You start with a little thing, which reminds you of something bigger, which reminds you of something bigger, which ultimately gets you to the place of remembering God. Sometimes you can't just climb there into the Kisei HaKavod. You can't just say, okay, today I'm going up to the throne. But you have to work there. You have to work for it. You have to use reminders, memory jogs. You have to remember where you are and where you're standing. And therefore, that's interesting. Marion just shared that my understanding of the Tcheles dye is that it was very expensive to produce, so maybe the tie of a fringe would be cheaper than the cost of a whole garment. The only problem with that theory is that God commanded it in the Torah. And unless you say that maybe Chasam Amonim She'Yisrael, God was worried about the money of the Jewish people, that would mean that it was always universally very expensive, and that God said, because you're going to hit it, that it's going to be expensive, I'm only going to give you one. The Torah doesn't really work that way. Not the Torah, the rabbis work that way, but the Torah doesn't generally work that way. Anyway, be that as it may, so Korach looked at it and he said, what this strand represents, it represents really the fundamental makeup and makeup of the Jewish people, and the fundamental makeup of the Jewish people is that one thing leads others. And that's what Korach was questioning. Why do you have to have one strand leading all the rest of the strands? At the end of the day, if it's all blue, if Amcha Kulam Kedoshim, if they're all holy, if the Kola Eda Kulam Kedoshim, then what do you need one to stand out for? He asked the same question by mezuzah. He said that the Torah tells us you have to have a mezuzah on a door. What happens if you have a house filled with Sifrei Torah? And in the Torah, there is the mezuzah, because the portions that are in the mezuzah are in the Torah. So you have a house that is completely filled with the message of remembering God. That you have to write them on your doorposts. And the whole house is a remembrance, because the whole house is filled with Sifrei Torah. What do you need a mezuzah on the door? Again, what kind of question was he asking? Because what Korach was asking is, why do you have to have anything that stands out? Why is anything in Judaism better than anything else? Why isn't it all equal? And if you have a house that's filled with Sifrei Torah, you've accomplished your goal, and there's no need to have a leader. If you look at it as just a mitzvah, then I could understand that, because the Torah says you have to have a mezuzah, But if you look at the mitzvahs as midos, as characteristics, as shaping of the Jewish people, then how is this shaping the Jewish people? Because at the end of the day, I don't understand why we need to have this system. Why do you need to have a Moshe? Why do you need to have an Ahron? Why do you need to have rabbis? Why do you need to have chachamim? Why do you need to have zakenim? Why can't we all just work together? And when you don't have a leader, so perhaps his motivation was, if you don't have a leader, then you don't have competition. You don't have anybody saying that they're better than anybody else. He would do great in American politics. He'd be right in there with the liberals, right? That why do you need anybody to be any better than anybody else? We're all created equal. Shkoyach Korach. Listen to this Gemara. Says the Gemara that Rabbi Bar Chana once said that this is in a situation where in the Gemara that Rabbi Bar Chana was telling over 15 or 16 stories about things that happened in his life. So he's talking about a story and they're all metaphors. He was talking about a story where he met an Arab merchant. And the Arab merchant says to him, I'm going to show you, Buluei de Korach, I'm going to show you where Korach was swallowed by the earth. So he brought him to a place, Chazei Trei Bize, he showed him two holes, Vahavu Mafki Kutra, and there was smoke coming out of those two holes. Shokal Gevava de Amra, and he took a tuft of wool, and Viamshine Bimaya, and he soaked it in water, Vahatzise Bereshe de Rumcha, and he stuck it on top of a spear, Va'ayele Hosam, and he stuck it into the hole. And when he took it out, Hava Ichrach Icharoche, it was singed. So Amarli, the Arab merchant, said to me, Atses, my shames, put your ear to the ground and tell me what you hear. Ushmais dahavu amrin, and I heard that they said, Moshe emes v'toirasai emes v'hein badoyin, and they are liars. So Amarli called Tlas and Yaime, Madiluhu Gehinnom, says every 30 days, Gehennom, the opening of Gehennom, comes back to this place, Kiv Besar Bekalachas, like meat that's boiling up in a pot that, it goes down, then it comes up and it pops all over. Va'omri, and it's the children of Korach, that whole group of people that rebelled against Moshe are saying, Moshe v'sayrasai emes v'hein badayim, that they are admitting that they are the liars and Moshe and his Torah is true. What was Rabbi Bar Chana trying to teach us with that story? What's the message of that story? Literally, did he put his ear down to the ground and hear those that were swallowed up in the ground saying, Moshe emes zaraso emes? I don't know. I don't know if we're meant to take it literally or not, but it doesn't matter to me. Because the message is that Rabbi Bar Chana was teaching us that the Bnei Korach learnt the lesson well, the lesson that Korach was rebelling against, that Korach was rebelling against a structure of authority, and they understood that that's a lie. You cannot live without authority. You cannot live and grow and thrive in Judaism without understanding that there are tiers, that there is a leader, and there are followers. There are those that are teachers, and there are those that are students. And therefore they said, Moshe Emes, the appointment of Moshe is truth, and we're the ones that have it wrong. But it applies not only to people. It implies not only that you need people to inspire other people, that you need people as leadership, you need people as leaders. That's the way God structured the entire world, by choosing the Jewish people to be the people that are going to teach the world the concepts of morality and ethics and values. But they realize that it applies to places also. And that you need places that are leadership places, places that stand out in their kedusha and their holiness from other places. That there is a Yerushalayim that is the center of the world, that stands as the centerpiece of the entire world, that holds the world up, that everybody can look to it and become inspired. Within Eretz Yisrael, there are those places that are saturated with kedusha, that are saturated with holiness. Because there are places that need to be leaders. There are places that need to be inspirations. There are places that need to grab us and pull us up. There are places that are holier than others. In the beginning, Korach thought that to have one city different than the others, that's unnecessary. It's unnecessary, it's unfair, it has to be equal. Until the Bnei Korach understood the message. That this is the structure of Judaism, the structure of the Jewish people, that there needs to be leadership, there needs to be mitzvos, there needs to be tzaddikim, there needs to be chasidim, there needs to be people that stand apart from others. And that's why Yerushalayim was a main theme of their mizmorim, of the songs that they sang that were incorporated into Psalms. Because they realized that this is a part and a parcel of the structure of the world. That you can't live if you don't have who to look up to and who to follow. David HaMelech set the stage for the Beis HaMikdash. David and Shmuel, according to the Gemara, were having a conversation. And they were involved in a conversation about where the mikdash, of where the temple should be. But why was David HaMelech having a conversation with Shmuel? Shmuel was from Ramah. Ramah was far away from the Beis HaMikdash. Why was this his sparring partner? Because who was Shmuel? Shmuel was from the Bnei Korach. Shmuel was buried in Yerushalayim. And fascinatingly, Shmuel's Yom HaPetira, the day that he died, some 3,000 years ago, was Kaf Ches Iyar. Today's Yom Yerushalayim. That was the yahrzeit of Shmuel Hanavi. The day of the liberation of Yerushalayim, Bizmanenu, in our times. Because Shmuel, like the rest of his family, came full circle and made us realize that not all places and not all people and not all things are created equal, and that's okay. We all have the ability to reach 100% of our potential. But we each have different portions, we each have different roles, we each have different places. Some have special qualities, and we need to be open and sensitive to be able to appreciate the lessons that they have to teach us. What Korach didn't understand, his children did, and we now must. There are people that have things we don't have. There are leaders that have things that we don't have. There are gedolim, there are rabbis, there are teachers, and they possess qualities and things that we need to follow and emulate, that we need to learn from. We live in a world that's so cynical, in a world that says we're all equal. A Korach who says we're all equal. That kikol ha'eda kulam kedoshim, everybody's holy. We're all holy on the same level. No, we're not. There are some that are here to be leaders. There are some that are here to be followers. There are some that are here to teach. There are some that are here to learn. Everybody has a role and everybody has a place. And that our leaders, when we knock them down, when we look at them and we say, why does that person get to be a leader? Why do we need leaders? We have so many books. We have so many things. We can actually learn it all from the stuff right in front of us. We don't necessarily need to have leaders. We do. Because we need people to show us how to apply, how to do it, how to make it real. And without that, there is no perpetuation of Judaism and no perpetuation of Torah. Korach's simple little structural desire to change, to get rid of leadership, to get rid of inequality, would have gotten rid of the entire structure of Torah. We need to appreciate the way that we as a people are structured and to utilize it to its fullest. To recognize Moshe emes v'sayrasei emes v'anachnu badayin. That Moshe's got it right. The Torah has it right. There needs to be our leaders. There needs to be that structure. And if we think that we need to get rid of that, if we think we need to question that, anachnu badayin, we're making a mistake. And just so that we never forget this, our rabbis instituted every single day in the Shmoneh Esrei, ala tzadikim v'ala chasidim, that we say a bracha for our leaders, to recognize how lucky we are that we have such a structure, how lucky we are we're being led, and that we're not floundering and plepling in the darkness. How lucky we are that we have the manhigim, that we have the leaders and the guides that we have. Okay, just a thought.
Oh, Rabbi.
Everybody should have a beautiful. Oh, you want to share something?
Yes, if I could, please.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, could I just make two comments, please?
I'm just going to raise my volume.
Okay.
Okay, go for it.
Well, 2 points. When the Gemara uses the word Arabs, Arabim, whatever, who are these people that they're referring to?
It calls them Mataya, which is like a merchant, and they were from Arabia, maybe. They named them. They named the Arabians. It's not a pejorative. Because we sometimes use that word as a pejorative, but the Gemara doesn't use it as a pejorative. It's really just a geographic finder. They were from whatever land in the time of the Gemara. They called Arabia, so then they were from that land.
So even back then, it was designated as being Arabia, the Arabian Peninsula, whatever. Somebody designated that landmass as with that name.
Some landmass with that name, yes, correct.
Okay.
Same as Arami, right? Arameans, Babylonians, yeah.
Okay. And now to the Parsha. In terms of Korach's motivation, I also heard that it was simply jealousy. I mean, all this was a big facade because he was just jealous and he accused Moshe and Ahron of nepotism, whatever. So was this all just a big facade?
So it must be understood on every level.
Okay.
On the simplest of levels, and simplest doesn't mean simplicity.
Yes.
It means on the most straightforward, without digging into it at all. Korach was motivated by the fact that he felt that he was passed over for promotion.
Yeah. Right.
And this was akin to a disgruntled employee coming in with an AK-14 into his workplace and shooting up the workplace. Because what Korach could have done could have toppled the entire Jewish nation.
Right.
Now, when you look at Korach and you say, but at the end of the day, it was in biblical times, and we're holding on different levels. What could have been one of the motivators of Korach? Then that allows us now to open the story up more and to be able to see different things inside of it.
Perfect. Thanks, Rabbi.
My pleasure. Okay, everybody should have a beautiful, wonderful, amazing day. Beautiful, wonderful, amazing Shabbos. And the Mirza Hashem, we'll see everyone on Sunday.
Okay. Chodesh Tov Muvarach. Bye, guys.
Chodesh Tov. Chodesh Tov.
Chodesh Tov. Good Shabbos.
Have a good Shabbos, everyone. Shabbat Shalom.